So at this time, I will call the meeting for the City of Lancaster Land Bank Authority to order. I have one announcement to make concerning the land bank. The City of Lancaster's Land Bank Authority met in executive session on Wednesday, February 14th of 2024 at 3 p.m. in City Hall, which is 120 North Duke Street in Lancaster, to discuss matters related to real estate pursuant to the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act 65. So there was an executive session, and I wanted to announce that. There is agenda that hopefully you all got to see. Is there any one that's not on the agenda or any topic not on the agenda that somebody would like added to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll say the agenda is set and we'll continue from there. At our previous meeting, we had our annual meeting, our 2024 annual meeting, the minutes of which were included in the board members' packet. After reviewing those minutes, it's our job now to approve the minutes through a motion, a second, and a vote. Are there any questions or changes to the minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
I'm sorry?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Angela. I have a motion to approve the annual minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeremy. A motion and a second to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion amongst the board? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. After the annual meeting, we held our regular meeting of January of the Land Bank Authority. Also, the minutes included in your packet, and we're going to do the same story with that for approval.
I motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Angela. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Plato. I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of our regular meeting. Any discussion from the board on the minutes, corrections, comments from the public? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Treasurer's report, you should have received, board members, in your email this morning, I believe it came. A copy of the treasurer's report. I think there's only one item on there, but we will need a motion also to approve that if there's no questions or corrections.
I move to approve the treasurer's report.
Thank you, Jeremy. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, AJ. Motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Does the board wish to have discussion? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Number 8 on our agenda is what we're here for, most of us, the property known as 401 West Vine, 122 West Strawberry, 128 West Strawberry Street, known as the Strawberry Hill Bistro Properties. We put out an RFP, a request for proposals for this property site that the land bank currently owns and purchased. We received one reply, and that was from the Chestnut Housing Corporation. And at this time, we're going to ask the folks from Chestnut Hill, or Chestnut Housing, to please come. We have Ben Lesher, and we also have Sue Waterfield, correct? You can just join us and run through your presentation. Once the presentation is finished, the board members will have a chance to ask questions of these folks about their presentation. And then at that time, we'll take any comments from the public if you wish to make comments or have questions at that time. So at this time, I will turn it over to you folks. And if you could just say your name for the record so we have it.
Who do you want to message?
My name is Ben Lesher. I'm a board member of Chestnut Housing, and this is...
Oh, you go ahead.
Well, you might need... Does she need to say her name?
Do you want me to say it?
Yeah.
I'm Susan Waterfield. I'm the board chair of Chestnut Housing.
Thank
I also wanted to introduce, we have Nicholas Selch, another board member with us here today. Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. We're happy to be here with you all. I'm kind of stepping in and presenting for Executive Director Chad Martin. So he helped present or prepare a presentation and some notes. We also got some questions ahead of time from Mr. Gilbertson. I can also reply to those questions too if you're interested, but I'd like to start with a presentation if that works with you all, and just talk a little bit about who Chestnut Housing is and then our proposal for this property. So Chestnut Housing began with a simple idea. Can we just buy a house? After decades of practicing community with neighbors, including gathering around weekly community meals on Monday nights, and years of hosting an emergency winter shelter, this was the seed planted by members of East Chestnut Street Mennonite Church. Beginning about a decade ago, we took steps to do more to address systemic housing needs for families and individuals experiencing homelessness in Lancaster. We did buy a house. With the help of many willing donors and volunteers, Chestnut Housing was born. More than a decade later, Chestnut Housing stands as an independent nonprofit affordable housing organization that operates 22 apartments and homes that have provided a safe, affordable, quality home to dozens of households. We partner with 7 different local agencies such as Tenfold, CAP, and Milagro House to provide referrals for our housing and services to our residents. Our 5-year strategic plan calls for the creation or preservation of 100 affordable homes, an aggressive but vital goal to help meet housing needs in our community. And this is a quote from one of our longtime residents that demonstrates the value of the housing we provide and the quality of life and stability for our residents. I'm sure many of you are aware of this, but each day in Lancaster County, there are over 500 people experiencing homelessness, and many others find themselves at risk of losing their housing. Burdened by rapidly increasing housing costs, an increasing number of families are facing hard choices about how to afford necessities such as housing, food, clothing, transportation, and medical care. Many Lancastrians find themselves just one crisis away from catastrophe. The City of Lancaster's interim housing strategy, which has now been integrated into the city's new comp plan, calls for 1,500 new units of housing in 5 years. It set an additional goal of having 300 of these be income-restricted affordable housing. And the bottom line is we simply need more housing options for all income levels. So that gets us to the project. Chestnut Housing proposes to purchase the former Strawberry Hill Bistro properties from the City of Lancaster Land Bank. Chestnut Housing would fully rehabilitate and restore the properties to create first floor commercial office space and 8 to 12 affordable rental apartments. Chestnut Housing would own and operate all areas of the properties long-term in service of the organization's mission to provide affordable rental housing to people experiencing homelessness. The Southwest Lancaster Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy, which led to the creation of SOWE, identifies 6 strategies for strengthening neighborhood connections. One of these strategies is to establish a neighborhood hub with offices and programming space. Our proposal would make a significant contribution toward achieving that goal. The first floor commercial space would provide offices for Chestnut Housing. Additionally, we are actively exploring sharing office space with the SOWE neighborhood organization. While this partnership is still in development, it holds immense promise for a collaborative approach to activating the Strawberry Hill corner with the neighborhood's most visible and active community development organization. The space would also feature a meeting room, sufficient to accommodate 15 to 20 people, and appointed with amenities like a kitchenette and coffee service. The common meeting space would occupy the most prominent corner of the properties with a highly visible and welcoming entrance. The meeting area would be available to rent or borrow on an hourly basis by community groups, nonprofit partners, and neighborhood residents, creating an activity hub that is truly for the neighborhood. All remaining areas of the existing buildings would be redeveloped into residential units. Tippett Weaver Architects has provided 2 schematic layouts for residential apartments at Strawberry Hill, and we are still assessing the best configuration to maximize the use of space and mix of apartment sizes. We anticipate final plans would include 8 to 12 residential units. We expect apartments to range in bedroom count from studios up to 3 bedrooms, and from 375 to 1,000 square feet. All apartments would be walk-up, incorporating several street-level entrances and utilizing areas of the buildings from the ground floor to the 3rd floor. At least 25 of the apartments would be income restricted to households earning below 60% or less of the Lancaster County area median income, which equates to about $40,140.
Favor and talk in the mic.
Sorry. At least 25, there we go, apartments. You guys should have told me sooner. At least 25 of the apartments would be income restricted to households earning below 60% or less of the Lancaster County area median income. And that's about $40,140 for one person, and then up to $57,300 for a 4-person. All the other apartments would be restricted to households earning below 80% AMI, which is about $53,000 for one person and $76,000 for a 4-person. Here you can see a preliminary sketch of how the first floor would be configured, with the 2 commercial spaces used for office and meeting areas surrounded by apartments. Our full proposal includes sketches for every floor of the properties. We propose a purchase price of $350,000, and we anticipate a total project cost of about $3.3 million, and that would assume the full 12 units. The expected timeline from the date of a sales agreement would be 2.5 years until construction is completed. We recognize that the neighborhood surrounding these properties is dense and street parking is limited. Our desire is to be a good neighbor and provide as many creative parking solutions as possible for the uses we propose here. First and foremost, it is important to note that around half or fewer of the current Chestnut housing residents have their own vehicles. Of the 22 apartments and homes we currently operate in neighborhoods across the city, only 2 of them have off-street parking. We will be exploring long-term shared parking agreements with local owners like Water Street Mission at the former St. Joe's School and St. Joseph's Catholic Church. And our understanding is that the city will grandfather in some street parking credits towards the overall parking requirements for these properties. City zoning requires accommodating 1 space per residence and 1 per 400 square feet of commercial office space. So the exact number of spaces needed for Strawberry Hill depends on the total number of apartments and final design of the space. I want to reiterate that our goal is to work with neighbors and nearby partners to create as minimal parking impact as possible with this project. Chestnut Housing intends to redevelop Strawberry Hill to have substantial community benefit. We will seek opportunities to utilize best practices for sustainable design and historic preservation throughout the project. We would reintroduce the 2 large windows on either side of the corner entrance to create more of a storefront feel to the properties and to make a much more inviting commercial space. We would incorporate trauma-informed design in the project, especially in the design of the office and meeting areas, to create spaces that are welcoming and inclusive as possible. Chestnut Housing would maintain the existing street tree and would work with local partners and city officials to incorporate a bike rack and/or trash receptacle, if appropriate, in the available sidewalk area. The economic opportunity created by 8 to 12 new affordable apartments cannot be overstated. The addition of quality, locally managed housing in this neighborhood will expand housing solutions to Lancaster's tight housing market and would generate significant property tax revenue for decades to come. In addition, the community hub would reactivate an important, highly visible commercial space with the potential for significant neighborhood activity. I want to underscore again that we expect the parking impact of this project to be minimal, and we will be as creative as we can to secure additional parking off-site to lessen that impact. So this is Chad's contact info if you have further questions for him. I'm happy to take some questions now. I can also go through some of the questions and answers that Mr. Gilbertson provided in advance as well.
Yeah, if you can go through those questions, those were some things that the board had in advance that we know of. Maybe we'll have more questions once you give us the answer.
Sure. The first question is, what additional permissions do you need to achieve the zoning entitlements necessary for your proposal? We have not yet engaged zoning officials in a detailed conversation about the zoning approvals needed for the proposed project, but upon obtaining an agreement with the Land Bank Authority, this would be one of our first priorities. Chad has had some preliminary discussions with Douglas Smith, outline our proposed mix of uses, and his feedback has indicated there would be support for this approach to the properties. That said, the properties are zoned R3, where both multifamily conversions of a building this size and commercial space up to 1,200 square feet are allowed or permitted by special exception. So our current understanding is that these special exceptions are the primary zoning approvals that would be needed. And we would, presenting a plan for sufficient parking to accommodate the proposed uses would be embedded as part of the zoning approval process. And I can say more about the parking in one of the other questions. It's okay to keep going.
Keep going. Run through your answers and then.
Yeah. We have a lot of good questions. The question is, have you identified what zoning use approval will be necessary for the commercial spaces? For example, will they be permitted as an office or community center or something else? The short answer is we have not, but we will consult the city zoning officials and are open to adapting our plan as needed to fit in the zoning requirements. I will note community center is also a special exception if we fall under that. But yeah, our current intent is to fit under proposed uses under a commercial office. The next question is, are there any other approvals required for your proposal? These properties are located within the city's Heritage Conservation District. However, since we are not proposing the demolition of an entire building or a new addition, we don't expect needing to receive a certificate of appropriateness at this time based on our proposal. Also, since it's largely a building renovation proposal, we would expect a minimal land development process, possibly maybe a small stormwater plan. The next question is, please describe your plans to supply the parking required for your proposal. We expect our proposed project to have a relatively small impact on available street parking due to the small percentage of Chestnut Housing residents who own vehicles and the relatively light parking needs for office and meeting space compared to other potential commercial uses like a restaurant or a retail shop. And our proposed mix of uses was designed in part to fit within the zoning parking requirements and the potential 12 grandfathered in parking spaces suggested in the request for proposals document. Several important factors that will go into our plan for parking include one, additional planning and cost estimating to determine the ideal square footage allocated to the commercial space and the ideal number of apartments to make the project viable. Again, we're still working through the appropriate mix of uses and units. Secondly, obtaining a determination from the city zoning officials for the number of street parking credits allocated to the properties. So again, if the 12 grandfathered in parking spaces holds or not. And thirdly, inquiring with nearby organizations about options for long-term shared parking like Water Street Mission or St. Joseph's Catholic Church for use of their parking lots. And then fourthly, seeking creative ways to minimize the impact on the project on available street parking in the neighborhood. Upon reaching an agreement to purchase the properties, we would immediately begin working through these factors to determine the exact number of parking spaces needed for the project and identifying creative solutions that minimize the impact on street parking. We expect the project to include a mix of street parking credits, if you will, and shared off-street parking leases. The next question is, how do you plan to preserve and maintain affordability for the minimum 25% of the units to be provided for households making less than 60% of Lancaster County's area median income? Quite frankly, this is the heart of our mission. We specialize in affordable housing, and the overwhelming majority of our current residents live with incomes below 60% of the area median income. This is who we serve, and we have built our program model and organization budget to maintain this level of affordability at Strawberry Hill and for all of the apartments and homes we operate. Our plan to do this here and elsewhere relies on a 12-year track record of raising substantial donated capital for all of our properties, utilizing volunteer labor creatively and effectively to lower construction costs and maintaining a strong reputation with a mix of lenders ready to invest in our work. The next question is, how confident is your team in achieving at least 8 housing units? Very confident. The next question.
We'd rather have more.
Sue would actually say we'd like to have more, but we're
looking for more rather than less.
But we are very confident we can get at least 8 in there. Like I mentioned earlier, we've had an architect lay out some schematic plans so that we know that it physically fits. The next question is, what energy efficiency measures are incorporated into your proposal? We have not yet identified specific efficiency measures for this project, as we are very early on in the design and budgeting phases for this project. However, the current condition of the properties, HVAC, insulation, window and door improvements required to fully renovate the buildings to our standards and modern building codes will result in dramatically improved energy efficiencies. This is something we'll be focusing on more detail as we proceed toward a full design and planning process. The next question is, if awarded, when will Chestnut Housing Corporation take over the titles to the properties and begin work on your project? Upon reaching a sales agreement with the Land Bank Authority, Chestnut Housing would immediately begin a due diligence period to work through many of the things discussed here, including more design work to identify the ideal number and size of apartments, more refined plans for the office space, creating a plan for parking, seeking zoning approval, etc. And we would immediately begin seeking financing for the project. From our perspective, it would be ideal to close on purchasing the properties after obtaining zoning approval and securing commitments for 50% of the total project financing. Due to funding schedules of several key sources of financing, this will likely take about 10 months or until December of this year. We're open to negotiating a closing date sooner if needed. The next question is, will your property be exempt from property taxes? Will any portion of your development be exempt from property taxes? We do not intend to seek property tax exemption for any portion of the project. However, we would explore applying for ALERTA, the tax abatement program. Can your organization demonstrate having the resources needed to acquire the property? The answer is yes. We have funds on hand sufficient to acquire the property. However, we are still determining how much of those funds we'd like to allocate to this project versus other capital needs in 2024. We expect to raise additional acquisition funds during any due diligence period we agree upon, and we have no concerns about securing acquisition funds as needed. The next question is, your proposal noted that Chestnut Housing Corporation has some very ambitious goals for housing development. How does your organization plan to assemble the capacity needed to achieve those goals over the coming years? We would be glad to share our 5-year strategic plan with authority members, and it is available on our website. It goes into more detail about our plan for capacity building, but I can note several key things here. First, we have already grown our capacity substantially since setting a goal to create or preserve 100 homes in 5 years. We have grown our operations from 12 to 22 apartments and homes, with 8 more about to begin construction in the next month or two. We have transitioned from a volunteer organization to a full-time executive director with more than 25 years of experience in nonprofit leadership. We plan to grow staff capacity as our organization grows. We have significantly increased our donor and volunteer base in recent years, and we've added to the number of partner agencies providing referrals and supportive services to our residents. Most importantly, we have a track record of success taking on increasingly larger projects, most notably redeveloping a former nuisance bar into 6 affordable apartments, then an 8 apartment development set to begin construction next month. And now this project expected to include a mix of 10 to 12 residential and commercial units. We have demonstrated steady but ambitious growth in our capacity and expect to continue this trajectory in the future. And the last question is, how does your organization intend to engage with SOWE throughout the development of the project? We would not be here today without a trusting relationship with SOWE. We are grateful to Amos Stoltzfus and the team at SOWE for everything they have done to support our exploration of these properties. We already partnered with SOWE last week to host a neighborhood meeting presenting our proposed plan and gathering feedback from local residents. We will continue to explore the potential to share office space with SOWE at Strawberry Hill. Our Executive Director, Chad Martin, regularly attends meetings of the SOWE Housing and Economic Opportunity Committee to stay informed about and help plan neighborhood initiatives about these issues. At a minimum, we would report on our progress to this committee and to SOWE staff regularly, and we would engage SOWE to partner on any future and community engagement with neighbors about the project. Our goal is to work closely with and take counsel from our SOWE colleagues. I believe that's it.
All right, thank you very much for that, Ben. At this time, I'd ask board members if you have questions that you would like the folks to address. I know they did address some of our questions that we had. Just for the public's knowledge, that was a question that came from us out of our executive session that we realized at the time. And so now any board members wish to ask any further questions.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Lesher and Ms. Waterfield regarding the creative leverage of funding to see this project come to fruition. I know that was one of the criteria in the scoring matrix in the RFP. You talked about your belief that you'll have an ability ability to raise at least 50% of the financing or funds necessary to complete the project by December. I imagine that may include philanthropy, local philanthropy. Are you exploring or will you explore any of the tools that were listed, the financial assistance tools that were listed in the RFP? Any types of tax credits for low-income housing or historic preservation or any other types of resources like that to leverage to maximize the outcome of this project?
The short answer is yes. Chad put together a list, so I'm not remembering there might have been 9 or 10 different funding sources, and Sue can chime in too. I think one of them, we've had some discussions with the local foundation. I know we've looked at CRIS. I will say we're not at this time exploring low-income housing tax credit program. We're open to exploring the historic tax credits. Some of the other are home funds, CDBG funds, fair funds, I think LSA, local services. I'm not sure what the A stands for, but those are the funds off the top of my head. I don't know, Sue, if you want to.
That's great. Great to hear that. Thank you.
The units that you showed, that was 300 and something square feet. Is that the studio units?
Yeah, we have, in one of the schematics, we have some studios that are 375 square feet.
That's just big enough for a room, ain't it? Will it have kitchenette and of course a bathroom, I guess.
Yeah, it'll have full kitchen and bathroom facilities.
Okay.
It might be worth mentioning that
I imagine that might be part of the entitlement approval process. I understand the minimum square footage for residential units in the city.
Yeah, to go below 400 square feet in a studio, we would need a variance to go below that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can Mr. Gilbertson speak to the tax abatement program and how that affects?
What abatement, I'm sorry?
The tax abatement
tax
program and how that affects collection of taxes over the coming years?
Yeah, so the LERNIT program is local economic tax revitalization, assistance program. And I know the city of Lancaster has a LERNIT program. I'm actually not familiar if the school district or the county have one as well, although they are eligible. And essentially through that program is that any sort of, as I understand it, improvements that are made to eligible properties, the value of that improvement can be discounted for a certain length of time at a certain rate on its property taxes based on how the terms and conditions of the LERNIT program are essentially approved by the governing body. So essentially, that might have a little bit of an impact on our tax recapture abilities as a land bank authority, essentially the tax remittance collections. However, that discount through the LERNIT is applied on additional value, as I understand it. So it might have some impact. It's also based on the ability to collect remittances post-development. So if this goes onto the tax rolls for the next taxing cycle, we would be able to collect through years 1 through 5 as soon as it makes its way back onto the rolls. So it could have some impact, not a substantial impact.
Excellent, thank you.
And it may be helpful to know too that it's a graduated tax abatement schedule. I think it's between 7 and 10 years. So for example, on that, the assessed value of the improvements made, the first year, 100% of the tax liability for not only the city taxes, but to answer your question, Thomas, the county and school district taxes. 100% of those taxes on that assessed value would be forgiven or abated rather. The following year, I think it's 90%, the third year, 75%, et cetera. And then eventually, in year 7 or year 10, you would be at zero. You'd be resuming the full liability on the value of those improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
And if I could add, I mean, that's available, pretty much you're eligible as long as you're within the district. So that doesn't really have anything to do with our nonprofit status. Like anybody would probably elect to do that.
Can you speak a little bit more about the parking? You talk about creative ways and about being grandfathered in by the city. I'm wondering if you've had conversations with partners around in the community, Water Street Ministries and the Catholic Church to date. Have you had any conversations, and what has come out of those conversations about parking?
We've started to, I know Chad, our executive director, he's reached out to Water Street to try to start that conversation. I don't think they've gotten back to him yet. I'm not sure about St. Joe's if we've had that conversation or not.
Thank you.
As an attendee of the neighborhood meeting that you partnered with SOE on last week, by the way, thanks for engaging the neighborhood in that way. That was really great to see. It was pretty clear that parking was a main concern of many of the residents that had attended that meeting last week. And I know the RFP, wanted to see, exploration of a variety of different types of commercial uses on the ground floor of the Strawberry Hill properties. I imagine parking may have, impacted your exploration of any retail or food-related uses on the first floor. I ask this question because the RFP, for the members of the public out there, the RFP encouraged bidders or proposers to consult with SOE in their SOE business needs survey. The SOE neighborhood was engaged and asked about what kinds of businesses they would like to see that might be walkable to them in their neighborhood. And I think some of the top choices were cafe, ice cream shop, those sorts of uses. Again, I imagine parking may have impacted your desire to move in that direction for any of the space on the ground floor, but maybe you could speak a little bit to that. And is there potential in the future for any portion of the ground floor spaces to eventually be converted to that kind of use in the future to benefit neighborhood residents?
Yeah, it's a good question. The short answer is yes. There's sort of two things going on with parking. There's one, what the zoning ordinance requires. And I mean, for example, the 12 units that are grandfathered in are based on what it was, a restaurant use. And so if you were to build a new restaurant there today, you would need to provide 12 parking spaces on site. So obviously if we did that, we wouldn't have any parking left to provide apartments. And obviously our mission is to provide affordable housing units, not commercial space, with all due respect. The second part is, generally speaking, retail and restaurant and cafes need more parking than residential uses and office uses. And so I would suggest that would place even more burden in terms of parking on the neighborhood. Like we heard at the community meeting, parking obviously is a major concern there. So that would be my concern, just that I think for our mission for housing, it would significantly reduce, the number of units that we could do, and quite frankly, probably wouldn't be a viable project for us.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? Hearing none at this time, I would like anyone from the public who would like to speak on this, either offer just information for us or to ask questions of these folks. You can come up to the podium here. We ask that you keep your comments down to 5 minutes. And if a lot of people come up, just try not to repeat what the other person said. We just have to hear it once. But if you would, sir, please state your name and your address for the record.
Yes, my name is Keith Holland. I live at 315 West Mifflin Street. I'm around the corner from the Strawberry Hill. I'm concerned about the parking because my property, I have a lot of parking cars that they don't belong to me. But the question is, how many people per household that you're going to have? Whether you have a single or 2 people or 3 people in your apartments would bring cars, because Lancaster City itself is an old city and you got plenty new vehicles and you got families, 3 and 4 people that have 3 and 4 cars. That would be my question. And then your water sewage line, because I know you have to expand that. That's another part of what the city have to do.
Thank you.
To respond to that, yeah, great question. Yeah, I can't say for sure who exactly the future households will be. One, will I say, just our existing tenant base, like I mentioned earlier, less than half of the households have cars. We tend to have smaller households, which tend to have less cars. Also note the smaller the unit, the more likely they have less cars, although that doesn't always hold true.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to approach and ask a question?
Good afternoon. My name is Fern Danis. I'm a member of the Coalition for Sustainable Housing, and I'm not here as an authorized representative, but I can tell you that the documentation is that Lancaster City and Lancaster County have a high demand for affordable units, particularly these units, even though it's 60% and below or 80% less of 80% of median income. That's still a high income. And so we're looking at primarily people who might be co-workers or might be teachers or might be public servants that could afford these units as well. So I just wanted to add that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Fern. Is there anybody else that wants to offer some thought?
Hi, everyone. Amos Stoltzfus. I'm the director, the SOE director for Tenfold, and also a neighbor. I live on South Arch Street, so just a few blocks down from Strawberry Hill. As I feel like most of what I'm going to say has already been noted, but I did want to just remind folks that, as Ben pointed out, the proposal from Chestnut Housing, it does align with the Southwest Neighborhood Revitalization Plan. Affordable housing, as we know in Lancaster, there's not enough of it. We need to take every opportunity we have to create more affordable housing. That is in our plan as well. And then the idea of creating a community hub, of having a place where neighbors can gather, can access resources. This is also part of our strategic plan. Ben mentioned the neighborhood meeting last week, and I want to note that we had about 25 neighbors that came out. It was obviously a lot more of a convenient meeting for neighbors to join than this one is, but don't think that the lack of participation here indicates that neighbors don't care about this. They do really care about this project. And, parking. Doug and Jeremy were able to attend, so we heard that very loudly, very clearly from our neighbors. So it's a big challenge in the Southwest and the Southeast neighborhoods, something that we're aware of, and neighbors did acknowledge in that conversation that it's larger than this project. And I do think it's also important to point out, as was referred to, that any development that happens on these properties is going to create a parking burden. And if you think of all the potential uses, I think Chestnut Hill's proposal probably has the lowest, would be adding the lowest burden to the neighborhood when it comes to parking. From the SOE side of things, I'm very committed to working with Chad and Ben and Sue and the folks at Chestnut Housing to explore creative options for parking. I've already had some conversations with Water Street, who recently purchased the St. Joe's school, and I think that timing of them purchasing that school also heighten some of the fears of neighbors, because there are some folks who have, historically been able to park at the school, and that's in a question now. So I think there's potential opportunities for some shared parking at the school, and we'll look into other potential solutions. So I hope there's a way forward when it comes to the parking side of things. And that was really, I think the only concern that we heard from neighbors last week. And I'm also excited, as was mentioned, to explore the possibility of sharing this space. And although we would love to see more businesses in the neighborhood, I think that we can get creative with how we activate that space, with art pop-ups, or, maybe even like a pop-up cafe occasionally that would be really geared towards serving neighbors. So I think we can, maybe get to some of that, the needs that were expressed in that survey that Jeremy mentioned, but doing it in a way that we're not, again, adding to the parking concerns. So from my perspective, very supportive of this project. Hope that you folks agree, and really looking forward to working together with Chestnut Housing. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Anyone else wish to offer a comment or question? Okay, hearing none, I'll bring it back to the board. What we're faced with today is we can either reject the proposal outright, or we can accept the proposal. If we do accept the proposal, we would need a motion to accept the proposal contingent upon negotiation of an agreement of sale that would be subject to approval by our solicitor, and a review of the solicitor, and approval of the board. So at this time, our motion would be merely to move into the sales agreement negotiation process.
Mr. Chair, I'd also like to bring your attention to the evaluation.
Oh, sorry, forgot to do that. In the RFP, there was a scoring sheet, a number of points that were distributed to board members. Just to, for the public that didn't see the checklist, what we did is we assigned a certain number of points. I'll just quick read them for your benefit while people fill them out. Provide affordable housing units, community benefit, complete and realistic scope, cost, proven ability or capacity to complete the project, historic preservation or restoration, historical architectural elements, windows, that sort of thing, creative use of funding, the leveraged funding sources, articulate a vision for how the proposal serves the neighbors in the surrounding context, the management and the ownership plan, and also the project timeline. Those are each assigned a value at different points, the total 100. Each of the board members now is scoring that, and they will bring it down to Thomas, who will crunch the numbers for us. So when you're finished with your score sheet, if you could pass them down.
And Mr. Chairman, I respectfully request that board members put their name on their evaluation.
While Thomas is completing that, I will mention that there are two board members, Jeremy Young and Milana McLeod, who will be abstaining from making a motion or voting on this project because of memberships that they hold, or board positions they hold, or because of their job. So Jared Young Yolanda will not be making a motion, nor will they be voting on this, as they are abstaining.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, for the record, the reason for my abstention is I serve on a committee for the SOWE neighborhood organization, including with Mr. Chad Martin, who's the executive director of Chestnut Housing. So I thought that could be a perceived conflict of interest, if anything. My employer, Lancaster City Alliance, also administers a facade improvement grant program, which could likely be a source of funding to execute this project for completion. So those are my reasons for abstaining from a vote today.
Guess I'll state my reasons as well. I am on the SOWE board, so I cannot vote because we provided a letter of support. Anus.
Okay, thank you, folks. So again, as Thomas is moving along, I'll reiterate, if we accept the proposal today, what we would need is a motion from any one of the non-abstaining board members to accept the proposal contingent upon negotiation and acceptance, a negotiation of an agreement of sale subject to the review of our solicitor and then approval of the final approval of the agreement of sale by the board. We can also vote to table the motion if you feel we need to discuss this more, or you can also make a recommendation to reject the proposal outright. I guess would be the three options that we have. I see Thomas scribbling away quickly. I apologize, I didn't get that to you before.
Mr. Chairman, the overall proposal score is 90.5 out of 100.
90.5 out of 100, and that's from all board members, correct?
That is from all board members present and voting.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board members on the procedures or what we're doing?
Mr. Chairman, I motion to accept the proposal and move forward with the sales agreement process, which will be contingent on board approval.
Thank you, Angela. I do have a motion to accept the proposal and move to the agreement of sale stage, which would need final board approval once again. Do I have a second on that motion?
I second.
Thank you, Karen. I have a motion and a second to approve the proposal and move into the agreement of sale negotiation stage. Is there any further discussion from the board at this time? Any?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, while I will be abstaining from voting tonight, I did want to share my enthusiasm about this proposal, and I think the proposal was very well put together. Obviously, there are still some unknowns to be determined, but also especially, again, appreciated the engagement that was done with the surrounding neighbors to get their input. So thank you for that, and kudos on the proposal.
Any other board comments? Any further public? Hearing none, we'll have a vote on the project. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, folks. We're at the next step in revitalizing a building that has been sitting fallow for many, many, many years.
You didn't ask for us to abstain, so can you ask that for that so it's in the minutes?
All those abstaining, please say aye.
Thank you.
I just want to add that this property has been vacant for the last 20 years, so it will be good to see something happening. We recognize the parking, it's an issue, but the Cabbage Hill neighbors got used to not seeing no parking spaces occupied by cars on that area. So something is going to happen, and we I'm assuming we are all happy that something is going to happen with these 3 properties. So finally, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other business that the board members wish to bring forward to the land bank? Hearing none and without objection, I will adjourn the meeting. I hear no objection, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.